Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Witchy Tidbits. I'm your host, Amethyst Stormmoon. This week we have a very special show for you. It is centered completely around the holiday of Imbolc, also called St. Brigid's Day, Candlemas, or Groundhog's Day. Well, we're going to be talking about herbs, decorations, the history, the meaning of the holiday itself, and so much more. Of course, we'll also have our weekly Q&A and our weekly tip as well. This week, our music is coming from London After Midnight. Well, we're going to take our first musical break, and when we come back, we'll jump right in.
Come along now and take my hand. I'll lead you
Welcome back to Witchy Tidbits. I'm your hostess, Amethyst Storm Moon, on this very special episode all about Imbolc. Well, Imbolc is known by many names. It's sometimes called Candlemas, or St. Brigid's Day, Groundhog's Day, and several other names as well. It shows up in many, many different cultures, everything from Irish to Druidic and pagan, Wiccan, and even Christian. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about the plants and herbs that are associated with this holiday. Evergreens and willow trees are two that are commonly associated with Imbolc. Others are rosemary and angelica, basil, bay, benzoin, heather, myrrh, clover, dill, almond, and any plant that has a yellow flower. So, lots of options there if you're wanting to make perhaps an Imbolc incense. Lots of good choices. Well, we will jump now straight into decoration. Well, we already know yellow plays a huge part in decorations. The reason for this is that it's one of the fire festivals. In the Christian version, it's called Candlemas. Term candle straight in there. That's the main decoration for Imbolc is candles, especially yellow candles. It's kind of an old country sort of thing. Dairy products and livestock that produce dairy products such as sheep, goats, cattle are all honored during this time and could be represented in your decorations. Or you could try maybe taking some yellow flowers and making an arrangement in an old milk bottle or something that had something dairy in it. The weather's another thing to look at. It's kind of, back and forth between the rain and the snow, and one day it's comfortably warm and another day it's below zero, especially here in Illinois. You can honor the rain and the snow with things that are gray or white in color. Bells and St. Brigid's crosses are also things that should be included in your decorations. And Imbolc is considered the first day of spring for pagans. So, lots of ways that you can decorate and make your home beautiful for Imbolc. We are going to take another musical break now. While you're waiting for us to come back, check us out on our Facebook page, our Google Plus page, our Twitter account, or our YouTube channel. Stick around, guys, and we will be back soon.
Your passion
Welcome back to Witchy Tidbits. I'm your hostess, Amethyst Storm Moon, and we are discussing Imbolc. Well, we have talked about decorations and herbs for it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Imbolc. Now, as I said before, it's also known as Candlemas, St. Brigid's Day, or Groundhog's Day. And a few other names I can't really pronounce, so a lot of them are in Gaelic, and I don't really want to butcher the pronunciation. So anyway, let's just jump right in. This holiday is associated with paganism, Druidism, Wicca, Christianity, Irish, Gaelic, and Celtic festivals. It was even celebrated by ancient Babylonians and even Egyptians as well. Now, I'm sure that it's probably not the same now as it was back then, but, same idea. The literal translation of Imbolc is in the belly, and this refers to the time. This is the time when sheep tend to start lactating. Because they're starting to breed, and it's in Old Irish, it's pronounced oil neck, I believe, and it translates literally to ewes milk. Sheep lactating ewes are considered first sign of spring in Ireland, in the ancient Ireland, I should say. Now, Imbolc has also been dedicated to the goddess Brigid, goddess of three faces, maiden, mother, and crone, which also translates into the Wiccan belief system. Brigid is a patron goddess of poetry, wisdom, and other early crafts. She's also associated with things like regeneration, light, and livestock, which, makes sense because by February, our days are starting to get a little bit longer, albeit maybe not much warmer, but they're getting a little longer. And it's during this time that you'll start to see maybe some crocuses or snowdrops popping up through the snow. The snows of December and January have started to maybe melt a little bit. And so it's a time of regeneration, renewal. Now, Brigid is also a mother goddess to lots of European tribes as well. Okay? It's not just Irish or Christian or Wiccan. She can even be connected to some of Roman mythology. It surrounds the celebration of Lupercalia and the Egyptian feast of Nut, I believe is how that's supposed to be pronounced, which is also held on February 2nd. Now, the worship of Brigid was just it was such a deep-seated tradition that since the church was trying to convert pagans to Christianity, and so what they were doing is they were taking pagan and other non-Christian holidays and celebrations and trying to tie them to something in the church to make Christianity look more appealing and maybe help the transition. Now, any Christians listening, first of all, I'm not trying to be offensive, guys. I have no issues with the Christian belief system. I grew up a Christian. I grew up in church. I taught Sunday school. But here I'm just stating facts. Okay? So, please don't be offended. Attempting to be as diplomatic and neutral as I can. Anyway, so they were trying to make the transition from paganism to Christianity smoother. And so for all the pagan festivals that the people celebrated, they were finding a way to tie them somehow to the Christian faith, such as Saint Bridget for Imbolc, for example, or Yule in place of Christmas. Well, I should say Christmas in place of Yule, but I digress. Anyway, you've probably all heard of the fire that they keep going constant that used to burn in St. Brigid's Cathedral in Kildare, Ireland. Well, that even ties into Imbolc, believe it or not. At that same place, there used to be a pagan temple. eternal flame for the goddess Brigid. Again, taking us back to the Flame Festival. At the time when Christianity arrived in Ireland, that pagan temple was actually taken over by nuns, and they turned it into an abbey. But they continued the custom of keeping the eternal flame burning, and no males were allowed inside. And that was before the 13th century. Now, in the 13th century, what stopped all this in this temple was that a bishop got all pissy because he decided he didn't like the no men's rule, so he declared the fire a pagan custom and had it put out. Okay, and then we're gonna move forward by quite a bit. In the 1960s, the Vatican, in Rome, Italy, publicly admitted that there's no historical evidence that Saint Bridget ever existed. And that's why they actually removed her as an official saint. Saint Bridget is actually the most celebrated and most respected person in Ireland, next to St. Patrick, of course. Some countries still have the traditional celebrations. Others have kind of modernized it, if you will. Imbolc is also a time when we pay tribute to Brigid as either a saint or a goddess, depending on your personal tradition. Now, the divine feminine is associated with water, therefore abundance, fertility. Again, that's kind of tying back to renewal and regeneration and the flow of milk. So, while some things may seem a little disjointed, as it were, everything does tie together. Now, I know this sounds kind of long-winded. I'm just kind of trying to paraphrase things as best I can, so please bear with me. When Christianity kind of overtook the pagan traditions of Imbolc, St. Brigid's Day, whatever you choose to refer to it as, they ended up associating it with the purification of the Virgin Mary and the feast of the presentation of Jesus at the temple. Again, this is their way of trying to make Christianity make sense to the pagans so that they'll convert. It's swapping out Saint Brigid. They're swapping out Brigid for Virgin Mary. And I can understand why they opted to do this the way they did, because it's easier to transition if there's something familiar to kind of bridge the gap. So, really, it was ingenious. Make Christianity feel not quite so foreign. More people are going to be likely to convert. It makes really great sense. Even again there with the increasing daylight and the flame and candles, let's think about it. Fire is often associated with purification. It's also associated with light. Jesus Christ is supposed to be the light of the world. Again, your lights, candles, fire continues to mix into this. Now, before the Christian church, Imbolc was kind of used of a way to predict what the weather's going to be like that spring. So, like, if it's really wet, then they figure probably going to be a really wet spring, lots of storms, lots of issues. But if it's mild and fairly calm, then they'll figure it's going to be a mild spring. Not too much rain, not too little, So, and actually, guys, this is where Groundhog's Day comes in, because also, let's think about it. We look at the groundhog. If he sees his shadow, he runs back into his den. It means 6 more weeks of winter, because animals have built-in radar for what the weather's going to do. So they run back into their burrows to hibernate a little longer because they know it's not time for them to come out yet. So, there's Groundhog's Day kind of put into that. Now, in Egyptian mythology, they didn't look at a groundhog, guys. They looked actually at a snake. It was more in Europe that the bears, badgers, groundhogs were actually associated. there's just so much to look at and so much history, and it's a really interesting holiday. And I honestly say, if you have time to research more on the history of Imbolc, I strongly advise it, because I could sit here for days talking about Imbolc's history. But seeing as nobody wants to sit and listen to me for 3 days, I'm sure, it might be easier to just go searching for some information on your own so you can read it at your own pace. Well, we are going to take our next musical break, guys. And as always, you can reach us on our Facebook page, our Google Plus page, our Twitter, or our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or even complaints, by all means contact us. Even if it's a complaint, we're still happy to hear from you. So, okay, musical break. When we come back, we are going to discuss more about Imbolc, of course, its meaning, which we'll get a little more into the history as well. Aside from its meaning, what it means, we're also going to discuss traditions. We've touched base a little bit on those in the history, but we're going to go a little more in depth. Of course, we still have our Q&A and our weekly tip as well. So by all means, guys, stick around, and we will be back real soon. Welcome back, guys. I'm your hostess, Amethyst Storm Moon, and this is Witchy Tidbits. This week we're doing a special on Imbolc, also known as Candlemas, Groundhog's Day, or St. Brigid's Day. Well, we've talked about decorations, we have talked about history, we've talked about herbs associated with Imbolc. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Imbolc tradition. Now, bear in mind that the traditions will change according to your path in life, whether you're Christian, you follow a Celtic deity perhaps, pagan, Wiccan, whatever applies to you. As we've already said, it is a festival of fire, of candles, rebirth, renewal. Now, I know a lot of you guys see the Super Bowl as a big event. But for those of us that are pagan or Wiccan, particularly, we celebrate Imbolc on February 2nd. It's one of the 4 major Sabbats. Those also include Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain, or the proper pronunciation of Samhain is Samhain, Irish Gaelic. But most people pronounce it Samhain nowadays. In between those times, we have the minor Sabbats. It's at the middle of the point between winter and spring. It's connected with the ancient Celtic, ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, pagans, Wiccans, even the Christian church. And who can forget, of course, those furry little groundhogs. This is a time traditionally for weather divination. We discussed that earlier too, that it was used to predict the coming weather, which again is where your groundhog comes into play. Long story short, it's also a time of hope and preparation, meaning preparation for spring coming, making all things new. One of the biggest traditions that most pagans and Wiccans I've spoken to follow is at Imbolc time, they go from room to room to room in their home, take everything out, all the curtains get washed, the carpets get shampooed, floors get swept and mopped, clothing being stored away during the winter months gets brought out and washed. The heavier quilts are washed and put away. Just simple things like this. This is where we get the term spring cleaning, because Imbolc is the beginning of spring for Wiccans and pagans, hence spring cleaning. Now, mind you guys, spring cleaning doesn't apply just to inside your home. It also covers outside. So if you didn't bother to really rake the leaves the year before, now be the time to take care of that. Remove kind of the debris from your garden if you have one. Add it to the compost pile or to the garbage can, whichever. It's a time for, if you keep mulch around some of your trees or plants or flower beds, now would be a good time to replace it. Painting fences, repainting rooms. Remember, this isn't just a time for spring cleaning. It's also a time for renewal, rejuvenation. This is also a great time if you have especially fruit trees, guys. You want to get your fruit trees pruned before they start to green out. Otherwise, it can actually cut back on your fruit yield later that year. So bear that in mind. This is also a terrific time to start looking for things that you need to do, maybe to enhance your garden soil, maybe tilling in some fertilizer. Again, guys, renewal, rebirth, new beginnings. The traditions primarily surround that. We also, a lot of times, will do a blessing on our homes, our families, our gardens, pets, because again, this is a time of renewal. And what better time to renew a blessing than the beginning of spring, right? So that blessing can grow along with our gardens and everything else. That being said, we are going to move on to the meaning of Imbolc. Now, we've already covered this partway earlier. It's a Gaelic festival originally that marks the beginning of spring. Some hold it on February 1st, others February 2nd. In the beginning, historically, it was observed primarily in Ireland and Scotland. Christians refer to it as the Feast of St. Brigid, particularly in Ireland. Imbolc is actually mentioned in some of oldest Irish literature. It was even important back then, maybe even more so than it is now. I mean, they didn't have a weatherman back then. They didn't have a farmer's almanac or anything else like that. They just had their animals and their farms to get them through. This is a time, again, for blessing the home, blessing the family, blessing the garden, renewal, new beginnings. It also marks the beginning of spring. The snows have started to melt a little bit. The temperatures are a little more varied. It could be 5 degrees one day and 40 the next, especially if you're in Illinois. But anyway, in Irish, Imbolc literally means in the belly. Now this refers to pregnancy of sheep, ewes. Now, mind you guys, this festival is, again, a festival of fire, of candles. This is also the time when the days are getting a little longer, nights are getting a bit shorter. It's also a time for blessings. It also means the renewal of Mother Earth. Now, that even can be traced back to Greek mythology as well, if you're familiar with the story of Demeter and Hades and Persephone. Persephone was captured, taken by Hades down to the underworld. She ate pomegranate seeds. Demeter threw a fit, got her back, but because Persephone had eaten seeds while she was down in the underworld, she had to stay 1 month for each seed she had eaten. Thus, winter, when everything's dead, Demeter is mourning. That pretty well covers the meaning of Imbolc. As usual, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, or constructive criticism, anything you guys want to say to us, by all means, contact us. You can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Twitter, you can find us on Facebook, and you can also find us on Google+. We're going to take one last musical break, and when we come back, we will have our Q&A and our weekly tip. So by all means, please stick around and we will be right back.
Darkened streets and blackened gloom, the candles dim in your bedroom, rain reflecting shadows in the night. The moon is full and through the mist I hear your voice, I feel your kiss. The line grows thin between what's wrong and right. your mouth on mine. Drunk on lust like drunk on wine. The world will end, we'll hear the thunder roll. Don't even sit. Don't even look away. Haunted by black-winged angel, come to me, release my soul from this misery. In the candlelight you'll see just what all this means to me. A line goes thin between what's wrong and right.
Welcome back to Witchy Tidbits. I'm your hostess, Amethyst Storm Moon, and this week we have discussed in bulk herbs, decorations, traditions, its history, its meaning, and now we are up to the point where we take our Q&A. We've had some really good questions this week, a lot of them, so I won't be able to answer them all this episode. So if your question doesn't get answered this week, it will get answered next week, I promise. First question here is, do witches have a Bible? No, we don't. Bible is more, it's supposed to be the word of a deity that's been written down by a prophet or, that sort of thing. Think of the 12 disciples of Jesus. The Word of God was written down through them. Now, we do use something called a Book of Shadows or a grimoire. It's kind of like a workbook or a journal, maybe even a diary. It's something that we write information in, be it perhaps writing a ritual or a spell, maybe a recipe for an incense, or maybe just little snippets of dreams we remember. Every witch's Book of Shadows or grimoire is unique to that person. So, no, we don't use a Bible, but we do have something to call our own. Next question. Do witches worship the devil? The answer to that question is a resounding no. Pagans and Wiccans, we do not even acknowledge the existence of Satan. Satan exists in the Christian religion, and only in the Christian religion. Well, the worship of the devil is meant as a way of disgracing Christian symbolism. It has nothing to do with the pagan or Wiccan religion or witchcraft. Oh, all kinds of good questions this week. Oh, here's one. I'm definitely going to answer this one this week. How do Wiccans, pagans, and witches view sex? Well, first of all, I want to start by saying there are next to no traditions or rituals that involve sexual escapades of any sort. We don't have orgies, guys. We aren't screwing every Tom, Dick, and Harry or Sally and Susie that walks by us, okay? Sex is a part of nature. Without sex, there would be no life. I mean, it's just that simple. Sex is the instrument that creates life. Now, I'm not going to sit here, guys, and say that there isn't a single tradition that doesn't have sex as part of a group rite, but I can honestly tell you, witchcraft and Wicca do not have sex as part of a ritual. We don't have any orgies. We don't have, sex parties. We don't do that sort of thing. I can't exactly actually list any traditions I'm aware of that do have sex as part of their rituals. I know there's a couple, but I couldn't name them. But as far as witches viewing sex, it's just simply part of nature. So, we have one more question tonight. This is a question about magic. What is the difference between black magic, white magic, and green magic? Okay, I'm going to start by saying, guys, magic itself is colorless. It's just magic. There is no color to it. It's completely 100% neutral, okay? It is the intention behind the magic that determines whether it is malicious or benevolent. If you have malicious intentions, the magic is going to cause harm. If you have good intentions, the magic will help. Now, green magic, I've heard it referred to many times. Really, all green magic is, it's not magic at all. It's the use of herbal and natural remedies. So, green magic actually is not necessarily a magic spell. That's the difference between black, white, and green magics. Now it is time for our weekly tip. In keeping with the in bulk theme, I have some tips for you on starting anew, especially if you're preparing to start a garden this fall, or this spring, I should say, pardon me. Be sure, guys, that you pick a place that's not really low, because if we get a lot of rain, you do not want the water to sit on that garden or it's going to kill everything. You also want it to be someplace where the soil has good drainage. And if you don't have something like that, guys, a little tip, get some sand and mix it in with the soil. Just a little bit though, guys, only a little bit. That will help kind of break it up so you have better drainage. Also, be mindful of where trees are, unless you plan to have a corner of the garden that's shade-loving plants. Keep in mind the surroundings and the position of your garden. And whenever you're going to start a garden, plan its location, and what you're going to do to it around what you intend to plant in said garden. Okay? Like, for example, if you're going to be planting cucumbers and melons, you'll want a very, very large space so that your hills can be quite a ways apart so the plants will have plenty of room to grow. I would say the same with tomatoes. Have plenty of room as well, because, guys, there are going to be times later on when those are going to get so bushy that if they are too close together, you're not going to be able to get in between them, and there's going to be a lot of tomatoes that'll go bad before you find them. Now, if you're kind of strapped for space, kind of like me, my garden's going to be done indoors in, believe it or not, an old fish tank. Take into consideration that there are some vegetables that are now compact that you can find in seed catalogs. Now, the compact cucumbers that I've I've seen they're more compact than the original guys, but they still need a lot of room. So, don't let the term compact fool you. When it comes to melons and cucumbers, there's no such thing as compact. They gotta have room to grow. But again, if you have limited space, green or yellow beans, like bush beans, guys, I wouldn't suggest the climbing beans that you have to put a trellis up already. Bell peppers are a very compact plant. Lettuce, head lettuce, mind you, cabbage, beets, carrots. Now, guys, potatoes take up a lot of room. So, unless you have a little more room, probably should stay away from potatoes. Herbs that do great in small spaces or even containers. Basil is famous for being planted indoors. Same with parsley. Chives can be a little bit invasive, especially if they're allowed to bloom and go to seed. So those you may want to plant in a pot. Any member of the mint family, this includes the mints, oregano, catnip, horehound. Do not plant them in your garden. Make sure that they are in their own container. They are extremely invasive and will choke out anything else you have in that garden. And I'm speaking from experience here, guys, because it happened to me. My very first herb garden, I had spearmint that I planted, and it completely overran everything else in my garden. It was frustrating to say the least. And by the way, guys, sticking some of those little plastic shields down in the ground is not going to stop it. I tried that too. So if you're going to grow a member of the mint family, put it in a pot. If you are really have a huge, massive amount of space, you can plant maybe some tarragon, sage, thyme, because some of these they're kind of a ground cover. So long story short, just be very mindful of the type of plants you're planting, how much space each one's going to need, what type of water and sunlight it's going to need, and also take into consideration what other plants are going to be in that garden. Well, that is our weekly tip. It has been so much fun this week, and by all means, don't forget to check out our Facebook, our YouTube, our Google Plus, and our Twitter. We will see you guys next week. Blessed be, and good night.